In the quiet town of Fall River, Massachusetts, on a hot August day in 1892, a chilling crime would shake the very foundation of what the town believed to be an ordinary, tranquil existence. 2 brutal murders. An entire family caught in a web of suspicion, secrets, and scandal. The victim, Andrew Borden and his wife Abby. But who killed the couple, and what was the motive behind the brutal murder? Welcome to Twisted Logic, and today we are going to discuss a murder so horrific that shocked the entire nation. Andrew Borden was of English and Welsh descent, who grew up in very modest surroundings and struggled financially as a young man, despite being the descendant of wealthy and influential local residents. Andrew eventually prospered in the manufacture and sale of furniture and caskets, then became a successful property developer. He was a director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also president of the Union Savings Bank and a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Co. Despite his wealth, Andrew was known for his frugality. For instance, the Borden residence lacked indoor plumbing, even though it was a common feature for the wealthy at that time. The house stood in an affluent area, but the wealthiest residents of Fall River, including Andrew's cousins, generally lived in the more fashionable neighborhood, the Hill, which was farther from the industrial areas of the city. Andrew had a loving family. He lived with his wife, Sarah Anthony Borden, with whom he had 2 daughters, Lizzie Andrew Borden, the youngest daughter, and her older sister, Emma Lenora Borden. They seemed like a very normal family from far, but little did we know the family harbored some very dark secret. Both the daughters, Lizzie and Emma, were very close with their parents. As some would say, the daughters had a great upbringing. But that changed on the 26th of March 1863, when Sarah Anthony Borden succumbed to her illness, leaving the daughters in distress. According to some reports, Sarah died of uterine congestion and spinal disease. Despite the loss of their mother, the daughters remained close to their father. The incident made the sister more close, as according to Lizzie, she had no memory of her mother. Emma appeared to be the only constant in Lizzie's life. Emma was a friend and a mother to a young Lizzie. As the years went on, Lizzie and Emma were very involved in church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to the United States. They were involved in religious organizations, such as the Christian Endeavor Society, for which they served as secretary-treasurer, and contemporary social movements, such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. They were also members of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. 3 years after the death of Sarah, Andrew married Abby Durfee Gray, a move which would prove to be the biggest mistake of their life. A move which would eventually drift the family apart. The daughters believed that Abby had married her father for his wealth, and as time went by, their hatred towards their parents became more evident. According to the maid, Bridget Sullivan, Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with their parents. Fights and quarrels became a daily sight, sometimes turning ugly. However, there is no documentary evidence of abuse or neglect from Abby towards Lizzie and Emma, but many believe that the relationship between them was less than loving. In May 1892, Andrew killed multiple pigeons in his barn with a hatchet, believing they were attracting local children to hunt them. Lizzie had recently built a roost for the pigeons, and it has been commonly recounted that she was upset over his killing of them. A family argument in July 1892 prompted both sisters to take extended vacations in New Bedford. After returning to Fall River, Lizzie chose to stay in a local rooming house for 4 days before returning to the Borden residence. Tension had been growing within the Borden family in the months, especially over Andrew's gifts of real estate to various branches of Abby's family. After their stepmother's sister received a house, the sisters demanded and received a rental property. Following this, Lizzie and Emma's maternal uncle, John Morse, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew, leading to speculation that their conversation, particularly about property transfer, may have aggravated an already tense situation. For several days, the entire household had been violently ill. A family friend later speculated that mutton left on the stove to use in meals over several days was the cause. Abby had feared poison, given that Andrew had not been a popular man in Fall River, probably a foreseeing of the future that would eventually come true. Morse arrived in the evening of August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night. After breakfast the next morning, at which Andrew, Abby, Morse, and Sullivan were present, Andrew and Morse went to the sitting room, where they chatted for nearly an hour. Morse left around 8:48 a.m. to buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River, planning to return to the Borden home for lunch at noon. Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. Although the cleaning of the guest room was one of Lizzie and Emma's regular chores, Abby went upstairs sometime between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. When Andrew returned at around 10:30 a.m., his key failed to open the door, so he knocked. Sullivan went to unlock the door, finding it jammed. Sullivan stated that she had then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa for a nap. She testified that she was in her third-floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie call from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." A frantic Sullivan rushed downstairs only to find Andrew Borden lay sprawled on a couch in his living room. His body, bloodied and broken, had been bludgeoned repeatedly with an axe. Looking at the horrific scene, Sullivan charged towards the upstairs into Abby's room. But to her shock, Abby was laying in an unusual position with no motion but blood all over the floor, her body brutally struck in the same manner. Dr. Bowen, the family's physician, arrived from his home across the street and pronounced both victims dead. The police were called and the bodies were sent for post-mortem. According to the reports, Andrew was struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes had been split cleanly in two, while Abby was killed by 18 whacks. Her skull, cleaned of blood and matter. It showed a huge section missing. Police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle in the basement and suspected of being the murder weapon, as the break in the handle appeared fresh and the ash and dust on the head, unlike that on the other bladed tools. Lizzie and Emma's friend, Alice Russell, decided to stay with the sisters the night following the murders, while Morse spent the night in the attic guest room, contrary to later accounts that he slept in the murder site guest room. Police were stationed around the house on the night of August 4th, during which an officer said he had seen Lizzie enter the cellar with Russell, carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. He stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Lizzie returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared she was bent over the sink. On August 5th, Morse left the Borden residence and was mobbed by hundreds of people. Police had to escort him back to the house. The following day, police conducted a more thorough search of the house, inspecting the sisters' clothing and confiscating the broken-handled hatchet head. That evening, a police officer and the mayor visited the house, and Lizzie was informed that she was a suspect in the murders. The next morning, Russell entered the kitchen to find Borden tearing up a dress. She explained that she was planning to put it on the fire because it was covered in paint, making her more believable as a suspect. And so Lizzie was called for integration. Lizzie's initial answers to the police officer's questions were at times strange and contradictory. Initially, she reported hearing a groan or a scraping noise or a distress call before entering the house. 2 hours later, she told police she had heard nothing and entered the house not realizing that anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eyes level with the floor, when they looked into the guest room and saw Abby lying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Lizzie reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her behavior and changing alibis, she was not checked for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was a cursory inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a proper search because Lizzie was not feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. Lizzie appeared at the inquest hearing on August 8th. Her request to have her family attorney present was refused under a state statute providing that an inquest must be held in private. She had been prescribed regular doses of morphine to calm her nerves, and it is possible that her testimony was affected by this. Her behavior was erratic, and she often refused to answer a question, even if the answer would be beneficial to her. She often contradicted herself and provided alternating accounts of the morning in question, such as saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then saying she was in the dining room doing some ironing, and then saying she was coming down the stairs. The district attorney was very aggressive and confrontational. On August 11th, Lizzie was served with a warrant of arrest and jailed. The inquest testimony, the basis for the modern debate regarding Lizzie's guilt or innocence, was later ruled inadmissible at her trial in June 1893. Contemporaneous newspaper articles noted that Lizzie possessed a stolid demeanor and bit her lips, flushed, and bent toward Attorney Adams. It was also reported that the testimony provided in the inquest had caused a change of opinion among her friends, who have heretofore strongly maintained her innocence. The inquest received significant press attention nationwide, including an extensive 3-page write-up in the Boston Globe. A grand jury began hearing evidence on November 7th, and Borden was indicted on December 2nd. 5 days before the trial's commencement, on June 1st, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. This time, the victim was Bertha Manchester, who was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchester and Borden murders were striking and noted by jurors. José Correia de Mello, a Portuguese immigrant, was later convicted of Manchester's murder in 1894 and was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. Lizzie's presence at the home was also a point of dispute during the trial. According to testimony, Sullivan entered the second floor at around 10:58 a.m. and left Lizzie and her father downstairs. Lizzie told several people that at this time, she went into the barn and was not in the house for 20 minutes or possibly a half an hour. Hyman Lubinsky testified for the defense that he saw Lizzie leaving the barn at 11:03 a.m., and Charles Gardner confirmed the time. At 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called Sullivan downstairs, told her Andrew had been murdered, and ordered her not to enter the room. Instead, Lizzie sent her to get a doctor. Both victims' heads had been removed during autopsy, and the skulls were admitted as evidence during the trial and presented on June 5, 1893. Upon seeing them in the courtroom, Lizzie fainted. Evidence was excluded that she had sought to purchase prussic acid, purportedly for cleaning a sealskin cloak, from the local druggist on the day before the murders. The judge ruled that the incident was too remote in time to have any connection. The presiding Associate Justice, Justin Dewey, who had been appointed by Robinson when he was governor, delivered a lengthy summary that supported the defense as his charge to the jury before it was sent to deliberate on June 20, 1893. After an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury acquitted Lizzie Borden of the murders. Upon exiting the courthouse, she told reporters she was the happiest woman in the world. Although acquitted at trial, Lizzie remained the prime suspect in her father's and stepmother's murders. However, Lizzie was not the only one who was seen as a suspect. Another significant suspect is John Morse, Lizzie's maternal uncle, who rarely met with the family after his sister died, but had slept in the house the night before the murders. According to law enforcement, he had provided an absurdly perfect and over-detailed alibi for the death of Abby Borden. Morse was considered a suspect by police for a period. A man named William Borden, suspected to be Andrew's illegitimate son, was noted as a possible suspect by author Arnold Brown, who surmised that William had tried and failed to extort money from his alleged father. The next suspect was Emma Borden, Lizzie's sister. Although Emma had an alibi at Fairhaven, about 15 miles from Fall River, crime writer Frank Spearing proposed in his 1984 book Lizzie that she might have secretly visited the residence to kill her parents before returning to Fairhaven in time to receive the telegram informing her of the murders. But let me throw in some of my thoughts on this case. Among all the suspects was one who was not seen as a potential murder, and her name was Bridget Sullivan. Borden's live-in maid. I could be wrong, but hear me out. According to Sullivan's previous statement, she had removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa. But if you look into the crime scene, Andrew was clearly wearing his boots at the time of his murder. She would testify that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this. She did not see Lizzie, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. Which seems quite impossible because when Andrew's body was found, it was Lizzie who called out for help from downstairs, revealing that Lizzie was already downstairs. Also, as mentioned before, for several days before the murders, the entire household had been violently ill. Maybe from consuming something that was not to be consumed, and Sullivan, being a maid, had control over the entire kitchen. Also, a very notable description regarding the case came forward when it was believed in her later years Lizzie was rumored to be a lesbian, and allegedly Sullivan during her final days gave a deathbed confession to her sister, in which she stated that she had changed her testimony on the stand to protect Lizzie. But again, this was my personal opinion derived from various sources and articles, and maybe I would be wrong. The Borden house later became a museum and operates a bed and breakfast with 1890s styling. Pieces of evidence used in the trial, including the hatchet head, are preserved at the Fall River Historical Society. The case was memorialized in a popular skipping rope rhyme, which goes something like this.
Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41.
Which of course is an exaggeration to what happened on that horrific day. So what do you think? Who was behind the Borden murders, and will the world ever know the real face of the murders?